I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. My name is Mark, I'm in my mid-30s, and I've been married to Jenna for 6 years. We were that couple everyone envied, often the life of the party, always laughing, always in sync. We bought a cozy two-bedroom apartment in a trendy neighborhood, decorated it with love, and built a life together. Things seemed perfect on the outside. But looking back, I realized that I should have seen the warning signs. Jenna started spending more time working late at the office, where she was supposedly finishing up projects. She became more distant, often glued to her phone and seemingly disinterested in our usual banter. At first, I chalked it up to the pressures of her job as a marketing manager. Maybe she was stressed, I thought. I didn't want to jump to conclusions without concrete evidence. It wasn't until I noticed the little things that my suspicions began to grow. On more than one occasion, she would come home reeking of cologne that wasn't mine. I asked her about it, and she brushed me off with some excuse about a colleague who had gotten a new scent. The way she laughed off my questions felt off, like she was trying a bit too hard to convince me. Things came to a head one Friday evening. I finished work early and decided to surprise Jenna with dinner. I walked into our apartment with a bouquet of her favorite flowers and a takeout from the Italian restaurant we love. I expected a warm embrace, maybe even a kiss, but what I found was a cold, empty apartment. Confused, I called out for her, but only silence echoed back. As I waited for what felt like forever, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out to see a message from Jenna's coworker, Rachel, asking if she was with me. My gut twisted as I texted back, "No, she's not home yet." "Why?" Rachel responded almost immediately. "She was supposed to be at the office party tonight. Is she not there?" My heart raced. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't ignore the growing dread in my stomach. I decided to drive to the office, convinced that she must have lost track of time. When I arrived, the party was in full swing, but Jenna was nowhere in sight. My worry morphed into anxiety as I approached Rachel, who looked puzzled at my presence. "Mark, hey, what are you doing here?" she asked, her expression shifting to concern. "I was looking for Jenna. Is she here?" I replied, trying to maintain my composure. Rachel's face fell and she hesitated before saying, "She left with someone a while ago. I thought she told you." Left with that information, I tried to process what it meant. Who did she leave with? Suddenly, my thoughts turned dark as I imagined the worst. I rushed back to our apartment, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal clawing at my insides. I had to confront her. I had to know. When Jenna finally came home hours later, I was waiting for her. She stumbled through the door, laughter still hanging on her lips, but it was cut short as she saw the look on my face. "Mark, you're home early," she said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, I was surprised you weren't at the party," I replied, my voice steady but laced with anger. "Who were you with?" Her eyes widened and she froze for a moment before she could muster a response. "I was just hanging out with some friends from work. Nothing serious," she said, but her tone was defensive, almost rehearsed. "Jenna, Rachel told me you left with someone. Who was it?" I pressed, my heart pounding. Her face paled and I could see a flicker of guilt wash over her. Okay, it was just a few drinks. I didn't think it was a big deal." "A few drinks? You left without telling me and you think that's okay?" I felt the betrayal wash over me like a wave. Jenna's excuses began to unravel. She went on to explain how she lost track of time, how it was just harmless fun, and how I was overreacting. But the more she spoke, the more her lies piled up. I could see her panic rising as she struggled to maintain her facade. It was in that moment, as she spun her web of lies, that I realized the truth. My gut told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a few drinks with friends. Her eyes told a different story, one of betrayal and deceit. I felt my heart shatter, pieces of my trust crumbling around me. I wasn't sure how I wanted to move forward, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this slide. The emotional impact was overwhelming, shrouding me in a mixture of rage and sorrow. I felt like a fool, and the sadness that washed over me was suffocating. But I knew I had to think clearly. Revenge wasn't something I initially considered, but I started to entertain the idea as the anger began to simmer. What would I do next? How could I make sense of this betrayal? That night, I went to bed feeling the weight of the world on my chest. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, contemplating my next move. The pain was fresh, but I found a spark of determination igniting within me. I began to plot my course of action, one that would ensure I wouldn't be the one left behind. In the weeks that followed, I would come to discover how deep the betrayal ran and how far I was willing to go to reclaim my life. This was just the beginning of my journey through heartbreak and ultimately revenge. The days that followed the confrontation with Jenna felt like the longest of my life. I went through the motions, work, gym, eating, but I was on autopilot. My mind was racing. Every moment I spent with her felt like a ticking time bomb. I kept replaying her excuses in my head, each reiteration only deepening my sense of betrayal. That sickly sweet perfume, the late nights, and the way she laughed too hard at nothing. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk at work, trying to focus on a project, but all I could think about was Jenna and her infidelity. I couldn't shake the image of her with that concierge, whose name I still didn't know. The thought of him, probably smirking with my wife on the other side of the wall, gnawed at me. It triggered something deep within, a primal instinct to fight back, to reclaim my dignity. I began to formulate a plan. I had been wanting to move, to find a place of my own that reflected my personality, but now it felt like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. I decided that I would buy a penthouse, something luxurious that screamed success. I wanted to turn the tables on Jenna and show her that I could thrive without her. First, I contacted a real estate agent named Derek. He was a family friend and knew the area well. When I told him what I was looking for, I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Mark, I've got some incredible options for you. We can find you something amazing," he said. I could feel a rush of adrenaline as we discussed my budget and the kind of place I wanted. While I was browsing listings with Derek, I couldn't help but think of the irony. Here I was, about to purchase a stunning penthouse that Jenna would never step foot in. A new beginning awaited me, and I was determined to make it as luxurious as possible. I wanted Jenna to see what she would miss out on, what she had thrown away. I spent the following weeks visiting various penthouses across the city. There were some breathtaking options, open layouts with views that could make anyone drool. I finally settled on a sleek, modern penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. It had a rooftop terrace where I could host gatherings and find solace away from the chaos of my personal life. It felt like a smart investment, but more importantly, it felt like a statement. Once the deal was finalized, I made plans for the move. I hired a moving company to take care of the logistics, and I began packing my belongings. Each item I boxed up was a small reminder of the life Jenna and I had built together, but I felt empowered as I removed her things from my space. It was cathartic, liberating even, and I could feel the weight of our shared history lifting. When the day finally arrived to move into my new place, I felt a strange mix of excitement and sadness. As I stepped into the penthouse for the first time, sunlight flooded in through the windows, illuminating the expansive living room. I was finally free. This was my space, a sanctuary where I could redefine myself after the turmoil, but I knew I had to let Jenna know about my decision to leave. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't just walking away, I was claiming my life back. I set a date to meet her for dinner at a local restaurant, somewhere neutral. As I prepared for the conversation, I rehearsed how I would break the news. I wanted her to understand that she had lost her chance with me. The night of our dinner arrived, and I could feel the tension building in my stomach. As I entered the restaurant, I spotted Jenna sitting at a table, fidgeting with her phone. She looked up and greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I sat down across from her, and we exchanged small talk about our week. Then the moment of truth arrived. "Jenna, we need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady. Her expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "What's going on, Mark?" "I bought a penthouse," I said, watching her reaction closely. "I'm moving out. I can't stay in our apartment anymore." Her eyebrows shot up in surprise and she stammered, "Wait, what, you're serious?" "Yeah, I'm serious. I can't be in a space that reminds me of your betrayal every single day. I deserve better than that." "Better than me?" She shot back defensively, her voice rising slightly. "You think running away will solve anything?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. It's not about running away, it's about reclaiming my life. I can't just forget what you did, Jenna. You crossed a line, and I won't let myself be treated like this. As I spoke, I could see the emotions churning in her eyes: panic, anger, and a hint of desperation. You don't have to do this. We can work through it. I'll change, I promise. But the truth was, I had already begun to heal. I had already taken the steps to move on, and no amount of pleading would change that. I'm sorry, but I don't believe you anymore. You've broken my trust in a way that I don't think you understand. I need time and space to figure things out alone, I said, my voice firm. The remainder of our dinner was filled with strained silence as we sat across from each other, both aware of the finality of the moment. I could sense her anger building, a mix of frustration and desperation, but I stood my ground. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. Leaving that night felt like shedding a weight I had carried for too long. I wouldn't allow myself to be a victim in this situation any longer. I was determined to rise from the ashes Jenna had left behind. I had the penthouse, and soon I would have the life I wanted, one that didn't include her deceit. As I lay in my new bed that night, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was on the path to rediscovery, and there was no stopping me now. The journey of revenge had only just begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. The first few weeks in the penthouse were exhilarating. I spent my days unpacking and decorating, making the space my own. It felt surreal to walk around in a place that was entirely mine, a fresh start free from the reminders of Jenna's betrayal. I filled the rooms with furniture that represented my newfound independence, and the views from the balcony were a constant reminder of how far I had come. In the evenings, I would often unwind on the rooftop terrace, sipping a drink while gazing out at the skyline. The glittering lights made me feel alive, and with every sunset, I could feel the remnants of my old life fading away. I was determined to embrace this new chapter fully, but part of me couldn't shake the lingering feelings of anger and betrayal that bubbled beneath the surface. One particular night, as I sat outside, I started to brainstorm how I could turn my pain into something productive. I wanted to show Jenna that I wasn't just moving on, I was thriving. I began to think about revenge, and with each sip of my whiskey, the ideas became more elaborate. I wanted her to see what she had lost, to feel the reality of her choices. It was then that I remembered the building concierge, Tony, the man Jenna had been with. I had seen him around often, always polite and helpful, but now I found myself viewing him as an adversary rather than just a worker in our building. After a little digging, I learned that he had aspirations of his own in real estate, and that he had connections in the industry. What if I could leverage that? I decided to reach out to him under the guise of needing help with something in my new place. I crafted a message, keeping my tone casual and friendly. I wasn't sure how he would react, but I wanted to see if he'd be willing to meet for coffee. The plan was simple. I'd gather as much information as I could about him, about his ambitions, and subtly play the part of the supportive neighbor while also taking notes on how to turn the tables. To my surprise, Tony responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet the following Saturday morning. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was my chance to infiltrate the world Jenna had chosen over me. When Saturday arrived, I met Tony at a nearby cafe. I kept the conversation light at first, asking about his role in the building and how long he had been working there. He seemed friendly enough, and I could see why Jenna had been drawn to him. He was charming in his own right, with a confident demeanor. I had to remind myself not to let that get under my skin. "Hey, Mark. It's good to finally meet you outside of the building," he said, extending a hand. I shook it, forcing a smile. "Yeah, same here. I wanted to get your advice on some renovations I'm considering," I replied, steering the conversation toward my agenda. As we sipped our coffees, I asked him about his background in real estate, subtly probing for information about his ambitions and connections. He seemed eager to share, talking about his dreams of eventually getting into property management. The more he spoke, the clearer it became that he was not just a concierge. He had aspirations that went beyond the building. "Honestly, I've been looking at potential properties in the area to invest in," he said, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. It's tough, though. There's a lot of competition out there. I nodded, pretending to show genuine interest while mentally taking notes. This was perfect. I could play the part of the supportive friend, all the while preparing to make my next move. I wanted to make sure that Tony knew he didn't have the upper hand in this situation. As our conversation continued, I casually mentioned that I was new to the area and was looking to connect with people in the real estate market. His eyes sparkled with interest, and he offered to introduce me to some contacts he knew. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was thrilled. This was exactly what I needed, a way to leverage Tony's connections to my advantage. After a couple of hours, we wrapped up our meeting, and as I left the cafe, I felt a surge of power. The pieces were falling into place. I would take advantage of Tony's ambitions and use it to my benefit, maybe even sabotage his potential future. The thought excited me, and I couldn't help but smile as I envisioned how this revenge would unfold. Over the next few weeks, I kept in touch with Tony, meeting him for coffee every few days. He was eager to share his insights and plans, and I played the part of the supportive friend well. I feigned enthusiasm for his ideas, all the while gathering information that would ultimately help me in my quest for revenge. Meanwhile, I began to notice Jenna trying to reach out. She texted me frequently, begging for a chance to talk, to explain herself. I ignored her messages, focusing instead on my own path and the plans I had set in motion. I was ready to hear her excuses, and I refused to allow her back into my life. But I couldn't help but feel a flicker of guilt every now and then. It was hard to completely dismiss the memories we had shared, the laughter, the late-night talks, the plans we had made together. Yet those thoughts quickly drowned in the anger I felt for her betrayal. I had to remind myself that she had made her choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. The more I learned about Tony, the more motivated I became. I discovered that he had been trying to secure a loan for a property he had his eye on, but it wasn't going smoothly. I knew this was my opportunity. I decided to leverage my connections and put a wrench in his plans, making it harder for him to achieve his dreams. It wasn't long before I found myself on the phone with a friend in finance, asking about the possibility of making Tony's life more complicated. I felt a rush of excitement at the thought of being the puppet master in this scenario, pulling the strings so that Jenna would realize what she had lost. As I plotted my revenge, I felt both elated and anxious. The thrill of the chase was intoxicating, and I reveled in the idea of turning the tables on them both. Little did Jenna know that while she had chosen Tony, I was preparing to upend their little world completely. With each passing day, I grew more resolute in my mission. I wouldn't just move on, I would make sure that they recognized the consequences of their actions. Jenna and Tony had their fun, but now it was my turn to play the game. And I was ready to win. The weeks turned to months as I continued to settle into my new life in the penthouse, all the while orchestrating my revenge against Jenna and Tony. My plan was coming together like a well-rehearsed play, and I felt a sense of satisfaction with each small victory along the way. I had become adept at navigating this new world, balancing my personal life with the intricacies of my revenge scheme. As the holiday season approached, I knew I had the perfect opportunity to execute my plan. Jenna and Tony would likely be wrapped up in their own little bubble, celebrating the season together. I was determined to ensure that their holiday cheer was punctuated by the consequences of their actions. I reached out to my friend in finance, Marcus, and explained my plan to him. I wanted to make things difficult for Tony, and Marcus was all too willing to help. He had connections to a few banks and could influence the approval process for loans. With a little persuasion, I convinced him to send an inquiry about Tony's financial background to the institutions he was considering for his loan. If there was any dirt to dig up, Marcus would find it. As I prepared for the holiday season, I decorated my penthouse with twinkling lights and a beautiful tree. I invited a few friends over for a holiday party, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and warmth. I wanted to create the image of a man who had moved on, who was thriving without Jenna. I wanted her to see what she was missing, The night of the party arrived, and I felt a sense of pride as I hosted my friends, showcasing my new home. I made a point to share stories of my recent adventures and the exciting plans I had for the upcoming year. I wanted to project confidence and joy, and it worked. Laughter and good cheer filled my space, creating a stark contrast to the emptiness I had felt before. Throughout the evening, I received a flurry of messages from Jenna, asking if she could come over. I ignored her texts, enjoying the festivities and the company of people who valued me. I had made it clear in my mind that I wouldn't allow her back into my life. She had made her choice when she decided to betray me. A few days later, as I was cleaning up after the party, I received a call from Marcus. "Hey Mark, I just wanted to give you an update on Tony," he said, his tone serious. "I did some digging and let's just say the guy has some financial issues." My heart raced. "What do you mean?" "His credit score isn't great. He's been late on payments for several credit lines and he's got some outstanding debts. If he applies for a loan, he's going to have a hard time getting approved," Marcus explained. I couldn't help but smile. This was perfect. Can you make sure they dig a little deeper? I want to make sure every institution he approaches knows about his history. "Consider it done," Marcus replied, his enthusiasm matching mine. "This guy is going to have a rough time if he keeps pursuing that property." That weekend, I decided to pay a visit to Tony at the concierge desk. I wanted to gauge his mood and see how he was handling the stress of his financial situation. As I strolled through the lobby, I took note of the holiday decorations that adorned the building, a stark contrast to the tension I felt building inside me. "Hey Tony, how's it going?" I greeted him casually as I approached the front desk. "Mark, good to see you, man," he replied, trying to maintain his usual charm, but I could sense an underlying tension in his demeanor. "Just checking in," I said, leaning casually against the desk. "How's the property search coming along?" He hesitated for a moment before responding. "You know, it's been a bit challenging lately. Financing hasn't been as easy as I thought." I feigned sympathy. "Really? I thought you had everything lined up." "Yeah, well, there are always hiccups, right?" he said, forcing a smile. The more I spoke with him, the more I realized that my plan was working. His confidence seemed to be faltering, and I felt a thrill at the sight of it. I wanted him to feel the pressure of his situation, to understand that there were consequences for the choices he had made. As the holidays drew closer, I ramped up my efforts. I sent out invitations for a New Year's Eve party, and I crafted the perfect guest list to include mutual friends, people who knew both Jenna and Tony. I wanted to create an atmosphere where they would be forced to confront the reality of their choices, and I knew my friends would be supportive. The night of the party arrived, and the energy was electric. I had arranged for a DJ and decorated the rooftop terrace with twinkling lights that danced in the night sky. As my friends filtered in, I felt a sense of pride in what I had created. This was my new life, and I was ready to embrace it fully. Just before midnight, I spotted Jenna walking in with Tony. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. I had been prepared for this. I wanted her to see how far I had come and how much joy I could find without her. The atmosphere shifted as Jenna entered the room, and I could feel the tension in the air. She looked stunning in a sleek black dress, but her smile faltered as she scanned the crowd and realized I was in control. I greeted her warmly, but there was an underlying current of tension between us. "Happy New Year, Jenna," I said, forcing a smile. "Glad you could make it." "Thanks, Mark. Happy New Year," she replied, her eyes darting to Tony, who was trying to navigate the crowd with an air of confidence that was clearly faltering. As the countdown to midnight began, I made sure to keep my distance from them, allowing my friends to fill the space between us. When the clock struck 12, everyone cheered, and I raised my glass to toast the new year. I wanted Jenna and Tony to witness my happiness from afar. "Cheers to new beginnings," I exclaimed, and everyone echoed the sentiment. I could see Jenna's face fall as she attempted to join in the celebration, but the reality of the moment weighed heavily on her. As the night progressed, I made it a point to engage with my friends and keep the conversation lively. I could see Jenna and Tony huddled together, whispering, their expressions growing more anxious as the evening continued. I felt a sense of satisfaction at their discomfort. When the party began to wind down, I took a moment to step outside on the terrace. The winter air was crisp, and I savored the freedom of this new chapter in my life. I felt a sense of triumph wash over me as I realized that I was reclaiming my happiness without Jenna. As the guests started to leave, I couldn't resist the urge to have one last conversation with Jenna. I found her standing alone by the railing, looking out at the city lights. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I said, stepping beside her. "Yeah, it is," she replied softly, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "You were wrong about a lot of things, Jenna," I said, my tone firm yet composed. "You thought I would be able to move on, but look at me, I'm thriving." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something, regret perhaps. "Mark, No, let me finish," I interrupted, needing her to understand. "You chose this path, and now you have to live with the consequences. You made your choice, and I'm reclaiming mine." With that, I turned and walked back into the party, leaving Jenna standing there, alone with her thoughts. I knew this wouldn't be the last time I encountered her, but for now I felt victorious. The first step in my revenge had been completed, and I was finally starting to feel like myself again. As the new year dawned, I was filled with a sense of hope and determination. I had taken control of my narrative, and there was no turning back now. The winds of change were blowing in my favor, and I was ready to see where they would take me. The next chapter of my life was just beginning, and I was excited to embrace it fully. As January unfolded, I continued to enjoy my new life in the penthouse. I poured my energy into projects that excited me, redecorating my space, pursuing new hobbies, and even reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my marriage. The world felt vibrant again, and I was determined not to let Jenna's betrayal cloud my happiness any longer. But while I was busy rebuilding my life, Jenna and Tony's struggles began to come into sharper focus. I heard through mutual friends that Tony's financial situation had worsened dramatically. Apparently, he had been denied the loan he was pursuing, and the stress of it all was starting to show. He was increasingly withdrawn and had started to lose his charm, which made me feel a sense of satisfaction. I knew my friend Marcus's inquiry had played a significant role in this. Tony was feeling the weight of his choices, and I wanted to keep the pressure on. I decided to pay another visit to Tony at the concierge desk under the pretense of needing assistance with a package. I wanted to see the effects of my actions for myself, to gauge how much turmoil my plan had created. As I approached the desk, I noticed Tony's demeanor. He looked tired, his usually well-groomed appearance slightly disheveled. His eyes had a look, and I couldn't help but feel a thrill at the sight of him struggling. "Hey Tony, how's it going?" I asked, masking my emotions with a casual tone. "Hey Mark, just busy with the usual." He forced a smile, but I could tell it didn't reach his eyes. "Anything exciting happening?" I pressed, genuinely curious about how he was handling the pressure. "Not really. Just trying to figure things out, you know. It's been a challenging few weeks," he replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "Yeah, I hear you. The market can be tough," I said, feigning sympathy. "I'm sure you'll get back on your feet soon." "Thanks," he said, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "I just need a break." As I left the desk, I felt a mix of triumph and pity. I had successfully turned the tables, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing with fire. The longer I went on with my revenge, the more I questioned whether it was worth it. My focus had been on making them uncomfortable, but now I was left wondering how much was enough. A few nights later, I received a message from Jenna asking if we could meet. It had been weeks since our last encounter, and I wasn't sure how to feel. I took a moment to think about it, but ultimately I agreed to meet at a small cafe that had become a favorite of mine. When I arrived, Jenna was already seated, looking anxious. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, but I could see the remnants of her previous confidence fading. She looked older, worn down by the weight of her choices. "Hi Mark," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as I sat down. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I appreciate you meeting me," she started, fiddling with her coffee cup. "I wanted to talk about everything that happened." "Okay," I said, crossing my arms. I was ready to hear her excuses, but deep down I was skeptical about what she could possibly say to change my mind. First, I want to say how sorry I am for what I did, she began. I know I messed up and I never meant to hurt you. It was a stupid mistake. Her apology felt empty, almost rehearsed. A mistake, I echoed, not able to hide my incredulity. Jenna, you didn't just make a mistake. You chose to betray me. That's a lot more than a momentary lapse in judgment. I know, she said, her voice trembling. But I realized after everything that what I had with Tony wasn't worth it. You were always the one who meant something to me. I've been so lost without you. I felt a mix of emotions surge through me, anger, sadness, and even a twinge of nostalgia. So what? You thought you could just come back and everything would be fine. It's not that simple. I didn't expect it to be, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But I want a chance to make things right. I've been talking to a therapist and I'm working on myself. I miss you, Mark. I want us to try again. At that moment, I felt the reality of her words wash over me. I had spent so long plotting my revenge, focusing on making her understand the consequences of her actions. But now, sitting across from her, I realized it wasn't just about punishing her anymore. It was about my own healing. Jenna, I've moved on, I said, my voice steady but firm. You made your choice and I've built my life without you. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I understand, she replied, her voice tinged with desperation. But I want you to know that I've changed. I'm serious about wanting to make things right. The conversation continued with Jenna pleading for another chance. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that we could rebuild what we once had. But the other part of me recognized the danger in that hope. I had worked so hard to reclaim my life, and I wasn't sure I wanted to reopen that door. After what felt like hours, I finally said, look, I need time to think about this. I can't just jump back into a relationship with you after everything that's happened. She nodded, visibly crushed but understanding. I get it. Just know that I'm here if you change your mind. I'll always care about you, Mark. As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I had faced Jenna and heard her out, but I still felt the sting of betrayal when I thought of my past with her. I didn't want to go back to the way things were, but the encounter had forced me to confront my feelings in a way I hadn't anticipated. Over the next few days, I found myself reflecting on our conversation. I recalled the joy I had found in my new life, the freedom I had embraced, and the lessons I had learned. While I could acknowledge Jenna's sincerity, I also recognized that moving forward required a commitment to myself above all else. It was time to finish what I had started. I needed closure, not just with Jenna, but also with the revenge I had orchestrated against her and Tony. I decided to pay one last visit to Tony, not as a friend, but as a man who had taken control of his life. I was determined to confront him about the fallout of my actions and ensure he understood the consequences of his choices. I wanted him to know that I was no longer the passive husband he had taken advantage of. I was reclaiming my narrative, and it was time for him to face the music. I decided to confront Tony at the concierge desk, feeling a surge of determination. I wanted to make it clear that I would no longer be a victim of their choices. I wanted to stand toe-to-toe with the man who had not only betrayed my trust, but had also played a significant role in tearing my life apart. When I arrived at the building, I took a deep breath to steady my nerves. As I approached the desk, I found Tony busy sorting through some packages, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as I approached, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mark, good to see you," he said, though the enthusiasm was lacking. "Hey, Tony, we need to talk," I said, my tone firm. "Sure, what's up?" he replied, a hint of wariness creeping into his voice. "I want to be straightforward with you. I know things have been tough for you lately with the finances. I'm aware you've been struggling to secure those loans." I leaned against the desk, watching his expression change from surprise to defensiveness. "Yeah, well, it's part of the process," he said, trying to brush it off. "No, it is. It's a reflection of your choices. You made a decision to pursue an affair with my wife, and now you're facing the consequences," I stated, my voice unwavering. His eyes darkened, and I could see his composure slipping. "Look, man, it was a mistake. I didn't set out to ruin your life," he shot back, but there was no conviction in his words. "Intentions aside, that's exactly what you did. You think this is just going to blow over." You've crossed lines that can't be uncrossed, I pressed, feeling my anger bubbling beneath the surface. And now you're paying the price. I'm not going to let you forget that. Mark, you don't know the whole story, he began, but I cut him off. I know enough. You made your bed and now you're lying in it. I won't let you drag me back into the mess you've created. I'm moving on and I suggest you start doing the same. I could see his bravado faltering as I spoke. The confidence he had projected in previous encounters seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of vulnerability. It's not that simple, he replied, his voice quieter now. Sure it is, I said, leaning in slightly. You need to understand that your actions have consequences. I'm not a victim anymore, Tony, and I refuse to let you or Jenna dictate my life. I've reclaimed my happiness and I'm not looking back. I turned to leave but paused for a moment. Just remember, every action has repercussions. You might think you've gotten away with it, but the truth has a way of catching up with people. I hope you're prepared for what's coming. With that, I walked away, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and relief. I had faced both Jenna and Tony, and I had taken control of my life in ways I never thought possible. As I exited the building, I felt lighter, as though a tremendous weight had been lifted off my shoulders. In the following weeks, I continued to focus on my own well-being. I immersed myself in work projects, traveled to new places, and forged deeper connections with friends. I even started dating again, reminding myself that I was worthy of love and happiness. Through it all, I kept hearing whispers about Tony's struggles. Word got around that he was having a difficult time recovering from the fallout of his affair with Jenna. I didn't find joy in his misery, but rather a sense of vindication. He had been a catalyst in my transformation, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. As for Jenna, she continued to reach out, sometimes attempting to apologize or express her feelings. I responded occasionally, but always kept it short and neutral. I needed her to understand that while I could acknowledge her attempts at remorse, I was not going back to a relationship built on betrayal. I had moved on, and I was focused on cultivating a life that brought me joy, not pain. In time, I realized that this chapter of my life had taught me something invaluable. I had learned about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of standing up for myself. I had transformed my pain into a springboard for growth, and that was something I would carry with me moving forward. As I looked out over the city from my penthouse balcony, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. I had faced the darkness and come out on the other side stronger than ever. Life was full of possibilities, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I had learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living well, and in that realization I found my freedom.